Good day, everyone. I'm Karen Bonadeo, Director of Alumni Relations. Thank you for joining us for today's Zoom meeting on Official Intelligence. What does it mean for you with Professor Mark Fagan? Mark, if you'd like to get started.
Well, thank you. Nice to see all you out there. I recognize some of you, and to you, nice to see you. For those who have not had the opportunity to take one of my classes, this is a little snippet of what it might look like, and obviously happy to connect with people on this topic or some of my other topics as you're interested. So I want to begin by taking you back to 2010. So if you think back to 2010, and I'll help you with that with a few reminders. In 2010, we had the introduction, the first iPad. Mark Zuckerberg was Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Along with that, there was the BP disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, for me, what I remember about 2010 was sitting in the boardroom of one of the big railroads. I was the consultant on innovation and technology, and I was introducing the management team to the power of drones. So drones at that time were really becoming an interesting concept. The technology was getting better, the costs were coming down. And lots of organizations were really just beginning the quest of, hey, how can I use this kind of technology to improve my performance? Well, I showed a video that we had done with a drone that illustrated the real power of a drone for a railroad. So we showed how you could do it for bridge inspections. We showed how it could be used to monitor traffic at grade crossings to protect automobiles and trains. We looked at operations themselves to see how we could look at and identify improvements in productivity, safety issues. And it all went really well. I was very pleased with myself. And as I'm walking out, the CEO comes over and says, this drone stuff's really interesting. We're going to pursue it. But I got to tell you, what I'm really interested in is this thing AI. I'm starting to hear about it, not sure what it is. Is this something we should really be exploring? And so I said, well, this is not a short conversation. This is really, there's a lot of important information here. Let's get together in a month or so and talk about it. And to which he said, great. Well, you've probably figured out I said that because I hadn't a clue what was happening with AI and what was going on. And I needed to learn about it. So over the next 60 days, and then for the next 13 years, I've been tracking what is happening with AI and how is it impacting all of our lives. Well, to give you a sense of its impact, I will make a startling prediction. And the startling prediction is, if you are on the East Coast and you've been up for about 6 hours, you've interacted with AI. If you are on the West Coast and only been up for 3 hours, you've interacted with AI. And if you're in Europe or Asia where you've had a lot more of the day, you've certainly interacted with AI. Now, what makes me so positive about this? Well, AI is literally everywhere. Now, perhaps a few of you flew internationally today, and when you went through Customs and Border Control, there was a image that was taken of you and used AI to determine were you. I realize that's a small slice of those of you out there, but I can probably give you some others that will make you say, probably true. If you looked at the weather this morning, weather is now being driven by AI algorithms. If you had a cup of coffee today, the decision on when to harvest beans being done by AI algorithms, at least for larger farms. If you had a croissant or a bagel or a Dunkin' Donuts, remembering your HKS days, all of those were generated with flour or other grains, where the tractor that was used was controlled by AI. So it is truly everywhere. And of course, if you don't believe any of those Think about what news was pushed to you when you went to your favorite platform this morning. That wasn't someone sitting in the back room. That was someone who was using an AI algorithm, and those pesky ads, those are AI driven as well. So we've got a lot of AI going on here. It is hard these days not to see AI in the news every day. I'm going to share some examples of those with you, just to give you the breadth of kinds of issues that we're seeing in the news. I like this one, AI here, there, and everywhere. It's omnipresent, and I do believe that's true. And by the way, I just took these from the New York Times and a couple of other papers. You can find lots of them. How artificial intelligence can save your life. Well, that one sounds like it's one we'd be pretty interested in. There is that pesky question about morality, and can machines actually learn morality? You'll hear in a few minutes, this is particularly important to me because one of the areas that I spend time working on is autonomous vehicles. And here we've got AI in so many dimensions, but one of the peskiest issues is around morality. I suspect all of you have been hearing about ChatGPT, which is the new ability to write a paper, an email, a memo. We at the Kennedy School are pretty nervous about this right now because put yourself back in your student days and think about, gee, it's 2 a.m. and you got a paper that's due at 9. And there may be a limit to how much you can substantively accomplish. Well, there's always ChatGPT. You put in the assignment and voila, you get a paper. Now, please note, the sources in that will probably be pretty bad. They haven't got the kinks out of that yet, but it is actually something that is becoming a thing. It is enough of a thing that the dean recently empowered a few people on the faculty to be thinking about how should HKS be thinking about this whole issue of ChatGPT. Not sure we've got an answer yet. To show how incredibly intelligent the OpenAI team is, not only do they provide you a tool that allows you to have the computer write a paper, they'll also sell you a tool that tells you the probability that it was written by a computer. So they're kind of playing both ends of the spectrum, which I think is an interesting model. If you missed it, my US representative, Jake Auchinclosh, you read a speech on the floor of the House, I think last week, that was generated by an AI algorithm. So it's everywhere. The last one, though, I want to highlight for you because it really gets to the essence of why it's so important for us to having this discussion. And it is right here. Child welfare algorithm faces Justice Department scrutiny. This was reported literally today. To show you the power of our HKS students, one of my students knows I'm interested in AI. This morning, about 30 minutes before our session, sent this to me. Boy, not only do they have great insights, they have great timing as well. But in reading the article, it is very clear. The concern is that child welfare decisions are being made through algorithms, and there's a fair amount of evidence those algorithms are biased against those with disabilities or mental health issues. So there is a lot of good in AI. There are some real concerns about AI. I'm going to focus on how it's being used and kind of the goods first, and then we will spend some time at the back end of the conversation about the risks and ways that you can mitigate them. We want to make sure we're not throwing away the baby with the bathwater. In terms of AI not only being in the news, it's also in the cartoon pages. I love cartoons to get us started, so let me give you a couple. The good news is that you're perfectly healthy. The bad news is my algorithms predict you'll be dead in 2 days. Another, equal pay for equal work. I guess they're really getting smarter. And a third one, Yeah, actually, yes, we did let AI choose the short list of candidates. So the humor is endless. It's a little edgy at times, but it really goes to the heart of a real concern about what is this and how much impact is it having. So perhaps a way to start is to think about how people describe AI. And this is just a standard word cloud that I took. And some of it is intuitive. AI, obviously, the initials itself. Robotics is a big deal for a lot of people. The idea of artificial intelligence, the full word. The other key ones, facial recognition, machine learning. These are a lot of, I'll call them the neutral buzzwords that people use to describe what's happening with AI. But I also want you to look a little bit more deeply, because there are some elements of this that are a little more nuanced. So the issue around human, that there's a really interesting dynamic going on here between us as humans and these algorithms. Another is this issue right here of bias, concerns about, is it making good decisions? You'll see here an issue around policing as well. So there's a lot of nuance beyond just the, okay, here's what it is. It's an algorithm that'll help you forecast the weather or send a wonderful ad to your phone. Now, having now talked about AI numerous times, I've violated one of my own core principles. You need to define the terms you're going to work with. So let's do that. So let me start with a definition. It comes from Britannica. So I'm not trying for anything too elegant, too academic. I'm looking for a common person's understanding of what this is all about. So read along with me. And as you read, as I read, think about what words really in this description resonate for you. And as you do, pop it in the chat. Just what words in this are really important. Now, I'm going to give the definition, but I also, in doing so, will try and answer Sanjay's question in the chat. He said, what's the difference between AI and an algorithm, and when are they different? An algorithm is one of the tools that enables AI to take place. So they're not synonyms. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the definition. So it starts out with the ability of a digital computer or computer-controlled robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. The term is frequently applied to the project of developing systems endowed with intellectual processes, characteristics of humans, such as the ability to reason, discover meaning, generalize, or learn from past experience. So here you start to see, okay, what are the key elements here? And so I've got a number of them people have identified. Human characteristic is one that I think is kind of really essential here, because at its root, it is trying to replicate our thinking processes, our decision-making processes. I also see people highlighting discover meaning. I mean, at least when I grew up, for years and years, I was educated that we are this very high level of human species, of animal species, and it is our ability to discover meaning, to create reason that differentiates us. Well, that's great. It now appears that some of that is able to take place in conjunction with a computer. So there's a question about being. I think that's intelligent beings is what they're going after there. So you can get a sense from this, I hope, of what it is that AI is all about. The last thing I want to highlight is the idea of computer and robot. A robot is essentially a mechanical device operated by a computer. But as you saw in the word cloud, robot tends to have a distinct focus as opposed to just decision making. And as we go through this, I want to be thoughtful about kind of keeping both of those in mind with us. All right, now, in order to kind of show the breadth and depth of what's going on with AI, I wanted to share with you how people are using AI for human resources. I picked this because we're all in the human resources business. So pretty much no matter what position you hold in government and NGO, the private sector, even your family, we're all HR managers to some degree. So there are four key areas where AI has been playing a role. One is on talent acquisition, and this is the one that probably gets the most attention. It is, if you are an employer and you're trying to find the best candidate and you have a very large number of potential candidates, it's really hard. And the question is, can we train a computer to better make that decision, or at least, if not better make the decision, more efficiently make the decision than you or I would? And so here, what you're likely to do is to say, what are the key attributes that make for a great employee? So you look across the expanse of people who are working for you, and you say, these are my superstars. You take their attributes, you mush them into the computer program, and it kind of figures out what are the key determining factors to take whether this is a great candidate or a not so great candidate. And so the challenge, of course, I'm sure you're feeling, and we'll talk a little more about it when we get to risks, is, well, if the data set you're using to make that determination is a biased data set, you're only going to perpetuate what you have today. And you may be, A, losing out on a whole set of resources that would be very powerful for your organization, or worse than that, you're explicitly discriminating against a group of people who have not been in the system so far. So that's the idea around talent acquisition. And I will share with you, it is one of the most common outward-facing algorithms. However, it has, beyond that, other capabilities in the HR domain. One is around employee engagement and retention. It is, how can I use AI to help me better keep my people here, to understand who may be challenging or who may feel challenged and may therefore be more likely to depart? And what can I do based on history to keep them here? I think that a very exciting area is on learning and development, and it's using AI to help your team become better trained and basically improve their skill set. And that may come through personalized learning that could take place. It can come through algorithms that help identify skills or capabilities that individuals would benefit from. And then, of course, in the world of HR, we can't just look at the acquiring people. I've got to look at the reverse, because remember, robots was a big part of what is driving AI. And here, what you're looking at is automation that has the potential to eliminate workers rather than retain workers. You see this all the time. I suspect you've called a 1-800 customer service line and got a chat bot instead of a human being. But you see it at the grocery store as well, where essentially the grocery store has outsourced the checkout function to you. Now, it's using some computer controls to make that happen, but that's an example of how, when we talk about AI in a particular domain, especially like HR, think about it holistically, not just in one small point. So This is an example of what kind of the expansiveness or holistic nature of AI. Let me also explain, though, that there is a range of AI applications that are out there. There's healthcare, there's automotives, there's finance. Oh, by the way, you want to go get a loan? That loan decision isn't just made by a banker sitting in their office. There's an AI algorithm out there that is crunching through and looking at your personal attributes to determine whether the bank wants to loan to you or not. We see it in social media, what's being pushed to you, in education, space exploration, gaming, also in entertainment. So it is very expansive. Now, the expansiveness is important because it hasn't just instantaneously come about. This is something that has been evolving for quite a period of time. So let me introduce you to the kind of the three evolutionary stages that people talk about when they think about AI. So the first, and for those of us of a certain age, we kind of remember this, the idea of enabling machines to do human activities, even if they weren't really thinking, robotics, dates back to the 60s. Early computer programs were oriented towards the same thing. They were trying to replicate what you and I would do in a more efficient and perhaps more comprehensive way. What has everyone abuzz has been for the last kind of 15, 20 years, the idea of machine learning. And here's what it means. It says, I am going to take and train a computer to make decisions based on a set of data. So again, I'll take you back to an HR talent acquisition algorithm. So let's say an investment bank is looking to hire people. And so what they do is they look at all their high achieving employees and they examine 50, 100, 150 different attributes associated with those people. And what they do is they find the most common set of attributes across them. And they use that data to then identify who would be the best candidates. As those of you who remember your statistics class here at HKS, you know what they do is they take and they break the data into two bundles, one that they're going to use for developing the testing training tools, and the other will be a sample that they can then go back to and say, if I had applied those tools to the team that's now working, would I have hired those people? And do I get the right people, or am I picking up the people that aren't such great performers? Based on the calibration that they can then do so that they are having an algorithm that just picks up those outstanding performers, they can then use that as resumes come in to determine who they want to hire. That's the essence of machine learning. I'll get to your questions in the chat in a moment. Deep learning is trying to take and allow the computer not just to think about the training data and work based on training data, but to itself get smarter as it goes. In a few minutes, I'll share with you some of the work I've been doing on autonomous vehicles, because this is a great example of deep learning. Every instance that an AV experiences that is new is being put into the decision-making algorithm about when I stop or how I slow down, or that kind of intervention. So let me pause here and just check in on the chats, because I know there are a number of questions. So yes, you love the stats, that's good. And econometrics, yes, this is exactly what it is. It is what you did, especially if you were here, 20 years ago, to try and better understand what's going on. What is different is the magnitude of the data is different, the ability to handle more variables is different, and the ability of the computer to allow the computer to start to self-correct. When you were doing the regressions, you would get a result, you could make a determination, you could make some changes. I'm now allowing the machine to take on that responsibility. All right, well, with that, let me just highlight, there are a lot of different dimensions of AI. I'm sure you've all experienced chatbots. I certainly have. Facial recognition. I was pretty impressed when I flew back from Europe about a month or so ago, and I came through Customs and Border Control. I do have global entry, so that helps, but all I did, it didn't want my passport, didn't want anything. It just wanted me to look at the camera. It took my picture, did facial recognition, and said, welcome home, get out of here. You can automate tasks with it. We've talked a little bit about deep learning. There's just an endless array of what's going on. Well, the endless array is important, but what's more important is, can it really create real value? And I want to use this as an example of real value. So facial recognition is one of the technologies that has really come into its own in the past decade. It's being used, as I mentioned, border control as an example, but this is one that I think is particularly powerful. It's being used to identify Parkinson's disease identification. And here's the deal. You can, as an individual clinician, observe a person and make an excellent determination of whether this person has Parkinson's or not. The problem is, it's very effective, but it isn't very efficient. The patient has to come in. There's only so many hours in the day that you have. This group developed a set of AI algorithms that can look at videos of an individual and with 95% reliability identify if they have Parkinson's or not. This is a great example of the power of AI. Now, the power of AI isn't just around healthcare or HR. For anyone who knows me, you know that my thing is service delivery. How in the public sector or in nonprofits do we deliver quality public services efficiently with equity? And AI has become quite an enabler of this. And I'll just give you some examples of where you see it. So in the world of healthcare, AI has become a very important tool. I mentioned just a moment ago the example with identifying Parkinson's. Today, if you go have an MRI or a CAT scan or an X-ray, chances are pretty good, in addition to a human looking at it, an AI algorithm will look at it as well to determine if the computer can find something that maybe you and I could not visually. Certainly being used for computer control in terms of the surgeries. We see it all the time now in diagnosis, and certainly COVID accelerated the use of these tools, but they seem to be here to stay. You probably know I'm not a healthcare guy, so I'm going to move off healthcare relatively quickly and go to something that I am, and that is I'm very interested in transport. I mentioned to you that I now run the Autonomous Vehicles Policy Initiative through the Taub Center. And we have, for the past now 6 years, been working with cities, states in the US and around the globe on helping them think about how do they want to create policy to allow for the really great potential benefits of autonomous vehicles to take place without the downsides. The upsides of this are, number one, can I improve mobility for people, especially people who have disabilities? Number two, can I do it to reduce congestion? In other words, could I get fleet operators? Number three, can we reduce costs? Number four, since AVs are likely to be electric vehicles, will they reduce carbon emissions? So there's a lot of potential good here. I'm not going to actually zero in on the policy issue. If you're interested in that, send me an email. We'll get you involved in the AVPI. But I want to zero in on the AI, the artificial intelligence aspects of this, because if any of you are in San Francisco, you will have seen a Waymo or Cruise autonomous vehicle. Looks something like this, running up and down the streets, now often without a safety driver. And you may wonder, how does it do that? How does it know what to do and how to do it? And the answer is, it has been trained through a data set. And the data set is, it runs up and down that same street all the time. And it is picking up an enormous amount of information. To give you a flavor, an AI is picking up the same amount of information that is being used in 1,600 tablets and phones simultaneously. It's a lot of data. And what it's picking up is it's picking up the road. February 1st, on a foggy morning in San Francisco, here is the density of travel. Here is where people are walking and crossing the streets. All these kinds of things are being picked up and stored, and the computer algorithm is learning from it literally every minute and recognizing, oh, there's a danger at that corner. What it is doing, it is replicating exactly what you and I do. So on my commute home, I ride my bike from the school across the bridge by the business school and then head to home. Well, if you've been here since the TNCs, Uber and Lyft, came to town, you probably know that they stop anywhere they want. Well, one of the most frequent places they stop is across from the business school by the stadium. And they block the road. You may remember it's a one-lane road, a lot of traffic, and I'm on my bicycle. Well, I have trained myself to anticipate that that's going to happen. I've also trained myself to know that the worse the weather, the more likely it is that I will encounter that. I also have trained myself to know that when I see a car door from the back close, it means that car is about to move. Those are all the kind of the thought processes, the algorithms in my head that I use to safely navigate my way home. An autonomous vehicle is doing the exact same thing. It is learning all of those pieces of information and potentially hundreds of thousands more so that it can operate safely. The use cases we have for this kind of technology, you can see it may be a taxi if you're in San Francisco. If you're in Houston, Nuro is delivering, which is the bottom one here. This is a grocery delivery autonomous vehicle, goes from the grocery store to your door. You come out and get it. But this is an example that's being used in Houston. In Texas, we now have some autonomous, I'll call them semi-autonomous tractor trailers, where what they've done is they've got in this lead truck the main computer that's making the decisions, and the others are just following. Believe it or not, using this technology allows for a 10% improvement in fuel, independent of labor costs, and that's a big deal to people. So we see a lot of this in the world of transport. I want to, though, recognize that we've got to, my own biases put me in this direction, but I want to share some others with you as well. AI is being very extensively used in the criminal justice system. It's being used in terms of discovery and document review. It's being used by law enforcement in terms of predictive policing. It's being used in judicial cases by judges to assess bail requirements or word just escaped me, probation. It's being used in a lot of different ways. I want to highlight here, though, this part of the headline. It generates some real benefits because, let's face it, we humans have bias as well. And there's endless research that shows how members of both in the criminal justice system, but I'll zero in on court justices, have biases that come through in their decisions. If AI enables us to overcome those biases, or at least educate the justice that it exists and make that person take a second thought, I think that's really good. But if, however, the algorithms are just being used blindly, or the data that's being used to make the decision, that training data that I mentioned before, is biased, then you got a real problem on your hands. And so it's the balance of the two that we need to be really thoughtful about. So I'm going to pause here and just check on the chats and see what people are saying. Okay, so what I've learned from taking a quick look at this is people who are interested in autonomous vehicles, send me an email. I'll get you on the list. We actually have an interesting speaker this coming Monday. He is working for one of the tractor trailer AI companies out in California. He's going to join us. I'll figure out how to get you in virtually, if not in person. All right, so let me then continue and address a more holistic way of thinking about this. So what I've done thus far, I hope, is getting you engaged and excited about AI and recognizing that, you know what, yes, I've got to deal with some challenges and we'll get to them, but it also has great potential. And so I wanted to share this framework with you that I think is a really nice way of thinking through how might AI help in my operation, in what you're doing today. So we start here in the central core of AI. One is there speech recognition that can help? Maybe it's if you're providing services to people who have a hearing impairment. Is there a way to deal with that in that case in terms of taking speech to text? Could you take text to speech if you had someone who had a visual impairment? Equally, what can we do on the vision front? How can AI help us see more? I've given you several examples of image recognition, machine vision. A lot of robotics plays on this. My autonomous vehicles also do. By the way, for those of you in San Francisco who are seeing those AVs going up and down, beware. It does not tell you, but it is in fact videoing you. There is a live video stream from anywhere from a couple to 6 cameras that is picking up anything and everything in its path. So, interesting question, and one we grapple with in the AV policy world is, whose data is that? What rights to privacy do you have associated with it? So I share that with you more just as get you thinking about machine vision is a big deal, and it's happening all the time. There are also opportunities for machine learning. That's the HR stuff that we talked about, the criminal justice kinds of things. You can get more sophisticated in these neural networks and deep learning, where the computer is essentially heading off in whatever direction enables it to best deliver its intended objective. Now, all of this is exciting and has great potential, but I want to show you how it can be applied in the real world. Again, I'll take you to something that I suspect every one of you had some exposure to, and that is the MBTA. Well, the past couple of years have not been good ones for the MBTA. You can see over here some recent MBTA safety incidents. These are all incidences, and I have to tell you, these are serious. In the past 2 years, a passenger was killed, a bus operator was killed, there were numerous derailments. Probably the most stunning, and thankfully no one did die from this, an Orange Line train going over the Mystic River, if you remember that. A piece of sheet metal came loose, hit the third rail, sparked a fire under the car on the bridge. Train stops, people are getting out through the windows, through the doors. A woman got nervous and literally jumped off the bridge. Thankfully, she survived. It's pretty amazing. The T is not in good shape, and it's sufficiently not in good shape that the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Transit Administration, came in and did an investigation. And their conclusions were too many unsafe events, inadequate staffing levels, safety certification for capital project work was not being done properly, and they need much more quality and compliance oversight. So this is the environment they're in. This was issued at the end of this past year. And so what do? Well, I have a hypothesis. And my hypothesis is AI could actually help them. Now, I'm going to put the caveat first out there that says the first thing they need to do is culture. And for those of you who remember your days here at HKS, we talk a lot about culture and leadership. They need a lot of that right now. But in addition to that, I think AI can really make a difference. The first role, I think, for AI is predictive maintenance. Just as you may want to try and predict what employee is going to be a great employee, you can similarly use data analysis to determine what is the probability or the likelihood that the sheet metal on the bottom of a train is likely to wiggle loose and fall down. That's what preventive maintenance is. You can also use it to determine what is the likelihood that the tracks on this segment of the green line are likely to give way when a train passes on them. So that's an unsafe event way of addressing things. In terms of the staffing, there is an advertisement right outside at the JFK T-stop, and it's got a very nice smiling bus driver who says, "Come join us, we need you." Yes, they do need to hire people, but it raises the question over the next 2, 4, 6, 10 years, should they be looking at autonomous buses? Can they use AI to better recruit and hire people who are likely to be successful in this environment? Beyond that, I think AI can play a very helpful role in safety training and simulations, where employees are provided with a number of different scenarios, and how they react to it is interactive. It's kind of like gaming, but to enhance their ability to operate more effectively. AI in many rail operations now is a safety overlay, where even if you have an employee, in the case of railroads, an engineer who's operating the train, if by chance that operator fails to see a red light and stop, the computer, the AI algorithm, sits on top of it and says, "Wait a minute, I'm going to put the brakes on. There's something wrong here." And then finally, thinking about quality control algorithms as well. So here's an example. You got a problem, maybe this can help. Now, I got to now get to risks and challenges. So a couple of cartoons to get us started, and then I'll get serious. We've outsourced all our critical business decisions to a flawed algorithm with insufficient data. What could possibly go wrong? Our unique Justify It feature features deep learning to find data that agrees with your point of view. Now, those are funny, but there's some real truth to them. In terms of AI risks, this is my favorite piece. This is not mine. I found it. I love it. And the reason I love it is it divides the kinds of risks into two components. It's got on this side over here, kind of national business level, and on this, more the application level issues. So I want to take a few and push them off the table for our discussion. Not that they're not important, but they're not ones I'm going to talk about right now. So the ones I'm going to take off is the economic risk. Absolutely. AI is changing jobs. It is making some things that were activities that people did and making them obsolete. And this hits home close for me because I have a daughter who is a science journalist. And when she read the chatbot GPT article, she got nervous. Is she going to have 35 more, 30 more years of working or not? I don't know. So there's some real economic risks. Put those to the side. We'll let the macroeconomists work on that. There are a lot of security risks, cyber issues in particular. Again, I'm going to let the Belfer people work on that. In terms of control risk, who gets to do this and how is it managed? Again, internal audit, going to let them do it. The place that I want to zero in on are really the issues concerning society and ethics, because here you have these AI algorithms which might be providing bad information. They may not be reflecting the values and norms that we as a society have agreed to. And if you can't see them, that can be a real problem. Because remember, the algorithm is doing a lot of the work that you would otherwise do. The last one that I really want to highlight are the performance risk concerns. Errors, bias, opaqueness, and instability in answers. If the data going in is garbage, the data coming out is garbage. This is the same thing you heard when you took statistics and when you did regressions analysis when you were here. The same applies here. We've got to make sure that what you're using is understood. It gets more challenging, though, when the machine itself is taking different directions and changing, for example, the weights of importance of different factors. It's very hard for you to come back and unpack them. It can be done, as we'll see in a moment, but it does require some hard work. So there are some serious risks out there. In HR, it's probably been one of the most visible. You may remember a couple of years ago, the Harvard Business Review put a piece, all the ways hiring algorithms can introduce bias. And a year or so ago, we saw Amazon and a number of other companies scrapping their AI tools because of bias against women or minorities or others. So this is a big deal, and I don't want to minimize it at all. How do we address the big deal? Well, one way is to learn from Wald. So this is an image. I'm curious if anyone, actually, if you know who Wald is and what this image is, raise your hand. I'll give you a minute to think about it, but not long enough to Google it. Chuck, tell me, what is it? And what can we conclude from this, and what relevance does it have for AI?
I believe, can you hear me? I believe
Yes.
This is a diagram of a plane in combat, and these were the bullet holes were, and it illustrates where you want to reinforce the plane as a result of actual experience.
Okay, so you've got 80% of it right. Let me get someone else in here to help fill it out. Andy, jump right in. What's the rest of the story, as you might
So
say?
the rest of the story, I think, is that that's a plane, and it indeed shows where the bullet holes hit, where the damage was done. But the key is that that's a plane that made it back. So you don't consider, those were not critical hits, because by definition, the plane made it back. What you don't see are the planes with the critical hits that didn't make it back. So that tells you that maybe you need to look especially at the areas where the dots are not present.
Precisely. And it turns out that the engines in the cockpit were the most vulnerable components. So I wanted to share this because this is what essentially the AI algorithm risk is. Is it seeing the dots that are not there as well as the dots that are there? So how do we deal with this? Well, there are lots of response strategies. We've got to deal with issues around security, data privacy, fairness, and there are a variety of different things that people are doing to get there. The one I want to close off on, though, is the idea of audits, of auditing the algorithms, getting humans into the process. So the way in which you can think about this, and this little graphic shows, is you start out with, here are my goals and here's what I'm trying to achieve. You look at the actual processing that's taking place. You look at the results and you see how well they mirror what your objective set was. And if so, you're good to go. And if not, then you kind of need to come back here and really zero in on, have I trained this system to work as effectively as I would like to? So I hope this gives you a flavor for AI and what's going on with AI. Let me do a quick summary and then happy to answer any questions that people have. AI, it's here, it's big, and it ain't going away. It's only going to increase in importance. Number two, it has the potential to make significant improvements in efficiency, in equity, in quality, in the way in which we deliver, and I'm going to zero in on my world, public services. Number three, you got to understand it, though, because it does run risks. And number four, the risks are significant. These are not trivial risks. That example that I started with about child welfare, if in fact the algorithms are systematically discriminating against those with disabilities, this is a big problem. This is wrong. And so how are we going to address it? We're going to address it through making sure we at least audit and understand what the algorithms are doing, and does it actually tie back to what we were asking for initially. So with that, I will welcome any questions. My suggestion on the questions is, why don't you just raise your hand and we'll get you into the conversation. Okay, Jerry, go right ahead. You got on mute.
Now you can hear.
Perfect.
Super. A lot of the value here seems to be getting sensible results from a lot more data than we were able to use before. And that seems to come from neural networks at some level. But I don't understand what it is that neural networks can do that earlier statistical processes couldn't do. Why can neural networks not choke on all that data and come up with reasonable stuff that we couldn't do before?
All right, so I think your operative word is the choke word, and what I think what AI provides through big data is the ability to process the information faster and more I'll use the word reliably, that may be unfair, faster and generate results easier than we could in the old days. The core logic is largely the same, although if I use my autonomous vehicle analog or example, what's happening there is, instead of requiring me as the individual to use the old techniques, it is doing it real time, all the time, with just enormous amounts of data. So I think it's the speed and the magnitude that is different, would be my description for it. Jeff, go right ahead.
Yeah, my company and I have done a survey, and essentially it seems about 50% of federal agencies think AI has terrific promise and are interested in it, and only about 3% are actually using it. From my deduction, which I can't be absolutely confident, it seems like folks think it's a great idea, but just don't have in mind the business cases and have a hard time getting off the starting block. So I'm wondering whether or not you or any of your colleagues have kind of thought in a governmental sense, what are perhaps the most valuable or the earliest and easiest use cases where some agencies could really get traction and perhaps also avoid pitfalls like discrimination or lawsuits?
The reason I opened with HR and I closed with HR is I think that is an area that is relatively low risk because you can actually audit it and see. And it's something that everyone does. And every organization hires people and trains people and develops people and tries to retain people. So that's one where also you don't need domain expertise, so that the ability to share the learning across parts of the government, I think, is a little bit higher. So that's one area. And then inside individual domains, I think it is using big data to do better predictions. I'm not going to say forecast because not all agencies are doing forecasts, but prediction of trying to get a sense of what is coming at us that we need to address and how can we do it more effectively. I think part of the reason you see that dichotomy between the number of people interested and the little group of people that are actually doing something is a lack of expertise, number one, and number two, domain expertise. It's hard, I think, to take something that works for autonomous vehicles and immediately translate it to criminal justice. And so if you need the domain expertise and you need the AI expertise, that's kind of in short supply. But to give you a sense of hope on this, there's a guy here at the Kennedy School who I think 2 years ago started teaching a course on big data and how do you take all this stuff and make some meaning out of it, which is a precursor to or an input to AI. And that course has gone from, I think the first year he offered it, maybe there were 30 people in it. I think he routinely gets 120 people in it now. So so people are learning it now, but it will take some time. Julie, what's on your mind?
Thank you so much. I found this very helpful in terms of using AI within a high trust environment. And I went to the Kennedy School just as social media was coming in. And I don't think we predicted the intensity of disinformation and extremism that also shepherded in. Can you talk just briefly about what AI looks like in a low trust environment, what we might keep an eye on?
I think it is a high risk because the AI that is misinformation or disinformation can be pumped so quickly and so effectively to so many people. And when we talk about the risks, I worry about the risks of an HR program that discriminates against a particular group of people. That is small compared to the risk of generating misinformation and using algorithms to determine who to target, how to target them, and what to target them with. So it's just some people have used the term weaponizing social media through AI. And I fear that's a real risk. But I can't stop on a down note. We got to find something a little more positive. So, Richard, did you get a chance to ask your question?
Well, and just following up on this, do you see any groups that are really addressing these unintended consequences or ethical issues that you raise that are being effective in what they're doing?
I think the answer is they are nascent, but starting to gain traction. And so I think that may be the optimistic way to end, is that we're starting to get people focused on not only the benefits, but on the risks and how to mitigate those risks. So with that, I will hand it back to Karen, and we'll wrap up.
I just want to say our sincere appreciation to you, Professor Fagan, for your time and expertise, and for all the alumni who joined us today. Thank you for tuning in. We look forward to keeping you engaged in future months. And for the most up-to-date school news and events, please visit the HKS alumni website. Thank you all for joining us today.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Mark.